Here's a number that tells you everything you need to know about where this housing market is actually headed right now. Google searches for the phrase, "help with my mortgage," just hit the highest level ever recorded. Not the highest of the past few years. The highest ever. And here's the part that should really stop you cold. Those searches are running higher right now than they were in the period directly before the 2008 housing crash, before the worst housing collapse in modern American history. That is the signal this market is sending before the noise catches up to it. So whether you own a home, you are renting one, or you have been sitting on the sidelines trying to figure out when to make a move, you need to hear what is coming. Today we are breaking down 5 massive shifts happening in the 2026 housing market that most people are either completely ignoring or flat out do not understand yet. And every single one of these shifts affects you, regardless of what your situation looks like. So let us get into it. The first thing you need to wrap your head around is just how frozen the sell side of this market really is. Not slow, not cooling off. Frozen. Because here's the core problem nobody wants to say out loud. The buyers are gone. Not all of them, but most of them. Right now, only about 25% of Americans actually qualify to buy the median-priced home in the United States. That is it. 1 in 4. The other 3 people standing next to you in line somewhere, they do not qualify. The banks will not touch them. That is the entire buyer pool sellers are competing for right now, and it goes a long way toward explaining the record low demand playing out in real time across nearly every major market in the country. And if you think 25% still sounds like a lot of people, here is where it gets worse. Inventory has clawed all the way back to pre-pandemic levels across most of the country. So sellers are not just fighting each other for that shrinking buyer pool. They are also going head-to-head against home builders who have been ruthless about cutting prices, stacking incentives, and buying down mortgage rates just to move units. They have the capital to do that indefinitely. The average seller does not. The number that really sums up how broken this is, over 600,000 more sellers on the U.S. housing market right now than there are buyers. That gap has not existed since 2008. So what happens when you cannot sell? When the listing sits for weeks, then months, the offers are not coming, and you have told yourself you are not dropping the price? A growing number of sellers are making a move you might not expect. They are not pulling the listing. They are not taking a loss. They are renting the house out instead. And these are not professional investors, guys. These are regular homeowners. People who bought 10 or 15 years ago, when prices and rates were in a completely different universe, who can actually make money renting the property out because their cost basis is so much lower than what the market looks like today. If you can clear $500 to $1,000 a month in profit by renting the place, why would you sell at a loss? You would not. And about 2.1% of sellers who recently pulled their listings made exactly that call and converted their homes into rentals instead. This is happening hardest in markets like Tampa, Houston, Denver, and Miami. These people have been called accidental landlords, and that label fits perfectly because none of them planned to be in the landlord business. The market backed them into a corner, and renting was the least painful exit. But look, I want to be real about something here. Being a landlord is not passive income where you just kick back and watch the money roll in. I have been a landlord. It does not work like that. There are tenants to deal with, repairs to cover, property management fees if you hire someone to handle it. It is a job. A lot of these accidental landlords are going to find that out the hard way. But here is what that wave of new rental supply does to the market. These accidental landlords are hitting a rental market that is already swelling. Vacancy rates are climbing because households are consolidating. People are getting roommates. People are moving back in with family. Every time 2 households merge into one, there is an empty rental unit sitting somewhere. And on top of all of that, a record volume of brand new apartment inventory has been landing on the market for the past couple of years and is still arriving now. New units, old vacancies, and converted family homes all competing for renters at the same moment. The result is that rent growth has practically stalled, We are looking at just 2.6% year over year right now. That is the smallest annual increase in over a decade. And in a lot of markets, it's not even growth anymore, it's actual declines. Here's something most people completely miss about how a housing market actually works. A for-sale listing and a rental listing are not operating in separate worlds. They are competing for the same human being. The person most likely to buy your house is currently renting somewhere nearby. And the question they are asking themselves every single month is this: does it actually make financial sense for me to stop renting and start buying? As rent prices fall and rental options pile up, that question gets harder and harder to answer in favor of buying. The gap between what it costs to rent and what it costs to own keeps widening. And renters are not blind to this. They see it. They feel it every month. And the bigger that gap gets, the more pressure falls on sellers, because lower rents do not just benefit renters. They actively work against sellers, because every dollar that comes off average monthly rent is another dollar of justification for a potential buyer to stay exactly where they are. This is the third major shift. Renters now have more leverage than they have had in years, and they are the ones actually steering the direction of this entire market. Not sellers, renters. Where they decide to move, how much they are willing to pay, which rentals sit vacant. Those are the variables that determine what happens to home prices in any given area. And here is what too many sellers still refuse to do, guys. Put themselves in the shoes of a buyer. Not in their own shoes. In the shoes of somebody who is renting right now, watching their costs flatten out or fall, watching their options expand, and calculating what they would pay every month if they bought a home at today's rates. That is the only number that matters when a buyer looks at your listing. Not what you paid, not what your neighbor got in 2022. What the buyer would owe every single month starting from day one. In a lot of markets right now, that number is shocking compared to what renting costs. And when the gap is that wide, there is no convincing argument to buy. None. Sellers who have not run that math honestly are going to keep staring at a listing that does not move and wondering why. Now let us talk about what happens to sellers who decide to wait it out, who think that if they just hold on long enough, the right buyer will show up. Because the longer they wait, the worse the conditions around that buyer become. And I do not mean that loosely. Nothing is getting cheaper. Look around. Utilities, insurance, groceries, gas prices that have been climbing steadily. Every mandatory expense people cannot just opt out of is rising faster than incomes, which means buyers have less budget room every month to absorb a mortgage payment. And here's what that actually does. It shrinks the buyer pool further while the seller sits and waits. The buyer who might have been able to qualify 6 months ago might not qualify today. The buyer who qualifies today might not be able to close comfortably at your price point next month. Waiting is not a neutral move in this market. It is actively working against sellers whether they realize it or not. Now here's where things get genuinely alarming. And I want to say up front that I am not throwing these numbers out there to cause panic. These are the actual data points that need to be on your radar. Serious mortgage delinquencies, meaning loans that are 90 or more days past due or already inside the foreclosure process, are right now at their highest level since 2022. We are talking about approximately 817,000 mortgages sitting in that critical danger zone at this moment. And that number is up 25% in just the last 4 months, not 25% over a year, over 4 months. That is not a slow drift upward, that is an acceleration. Now, is this 2008? No. The 2008 crisis pushed something like 10 million foreclosures through the system at once. We are not at those levels, but the trajectory is the thing that should be getting everyone's attention. A 25% jump in serious delinquencies in 4 months is pointing toward a market that looks dramatically different 6 to 12 months from today. The borrowers getting hit the hardest, the fastest, are exactly who you would expect. FHA borrowers. People who came into the market with smaller down payments, thinner credit scores, and almost no equity cushion to absorb any kind of shock. In markets where values have dipped even slightly since purchase, Some of these buyers are already underwater before they have even had the chance to build a single dollar of meaningful equity. They have no buffer. And once you fall behind, the data shows that staying behind is the pattern. According to VantageScore, delinquencies are climbing at every stage of the process right now, not just the serious end, every stage. And specifically, serious delinquencies are up 18% year over year. The three main factors driving this: elevated mortgage rates, surging insurance costs, and the broad household budget pressure that is squeezing families across every income level. And here's what I really want people to understand, guys, because this is the piece that connects everything. It is not just mortgage delinquencies climbing. Auto loan delinquencies are up. Credit card delinquencies are up. Student loan delinquencies are up. The financial picture for American households is deteriorating across the board at the same time, from multiple directions at once. This is not a housing problem in isolation. This is a household finances problem that is expressing itself through the housing market. So when sellers who are waiting take the approach of, things will probably get better next year, without looking at these trends, they are making a bet against every piece of data sitting in front of them right now. And that brings us back to where we started. Those Google searches for help with a mortgage surging to the highest level in recorded history, higher than they were before 2008. Think about who is doing that search, not someone already 3 months behind. The person who sees the edge coming, who just lost their job, who looked at their budget and realized they have maybe 60 days before they cannot cover the payment. More of those people exist right now than at any point in the run-up to the worst housing crash of our lifetimes. That is not an opinion. That is what the search data says. Let me give you a real-world example of how frozen parts of this market actually are. There is a property that has been sitting on the market for over a year with zero movement, listed in early 2026 at $7.95 million, and this was not some old neglected home. This was torn down and rebuilt from scratch, brand new construction. After months of silence, the sellers cut the price by $500,000 and brought it to $7.495 million. Still nothing. Now obviously, the people searching for mortgage help are not shopping in the $7.5 million range. But this example illustrates something that applies at every price point. Price cuts alone cannot fix a demand problem. When affordability is broken at a structural level, knocking $500,000 off a listing does not magically produce a buyer who does not exist in that market. And the job market is making all of this dramatically worse. People who have been laid off and are trying to replace that income are running into a market that is genuinely punishing right now. Getting back to the same salary level, not even getting promoted, just getting back to where you were before, can take 6, 8, or 10 months in this environment. Without a serious emergency fund built up in advance of that, the mortgage is one of the first obligations that starts to slip. And here's something really important if you are in that situation or starting to see it coming. Do not wait until you are 90 days past due to call your lender. The options available to you in month 1 of difficulty, forbearance, loan modification, restructuring, are dramatically better than what is available once you have already entered serious delinquency. Once you're in the foreclosure pipeline, your window for a clean recovery gets very narrow very quickly. The people who search for help early enough sometimes make it through. The people who wait until it is already a crisis usually do not. Now let us shift into the 5th major development, because this one is getting almost no coverage, and it directly affects millions of people who thought they had found the most practical path into home ownership. For a long time, condos were the answer. When single-family homes got too expensive for regular buyers to access, condos were the entry point, the more affordable on-ramp into home ownership. Could not afford a house? You bought a condo. That was the play. That used to be true, guys. Used to be. Past tense. Because the condo market right now is an absolute mess, and the problems go far deeper than the sticker price. Start with cost. Condo prices have climbed to the point where that affordability advantage has basically evaporated in most major markets. But it is not just the purchase price. It is everything that comes attached to it. HOA fees have exploded. They have been rising year after year in buildings all across the country, and a lot of buyers do not fully account for them until they are already locked in. Add that monthly fee on top of a mortgage and insurance, and you start to see how quickly the math falls apart. And then there are special assessments. These are the one-time charges a condo association can levy on every unit owner when the building needs major structural work, new roofing, plumbing overhauls, foundation repairs. These are not small numbers anymore, guys. Six-figure special assessments have gone from horror story to recognized recurring risk. A $100,000 or $200,000 bill arriving in your mailbox after you already own the unit. That is not a surprise expense. That is a second mortgage arriving without warning at any point during your ownership. And look at what is actually being built. In Miami, it is obvious. Everything going up is purely luxury. High rises aimed at the global wealthy. But this is not a Miami-only problem. It is repeating in city after city. The older condo stock from 50 or 60 years ago, the stuff that used to be attainable for regular buyers, gets demolished and replaced with units that cost 10 or 20 times more per square foot than what was there before. The affordable condo is being systematically erased from the market and replaced with product that the people who needed affordable condos could never afford. Then you get to financing, and this is where a lot of condo buyers walk in completely blindsided. Getting a loan on a condo is not the same as getting a loan on a single-family home, guys. Many lenders are requiring dramatically larger down payments. We are talking 25 to 30% in a lot of cases. And FHA loans, which exist specifically to allow lower down payments, can technically be used on condos. But the list of condo developments that actually qualify is extremely short. Most do not make the cut. And then there is the list that almost nobody talks about. The Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac blacklist. These are condo buildings that are completely ineligible for conventional financing. Not difficult to finance. Ineligible. If the condo you want is on that list, your options are cash, a portfolio lender willing to take the risk, or walk away. That eliminates a massive portion of the condo market from the buyer pool before the conversation even gets to price. So think about what a first-time buyer considering a condo actually faces today. Potentially 25 to 30% down out of pocket. Ongoing HOA fees that have been rising every year with no ceiling in sight. The unpredictable wild card of a six-figure special assessment that could land at any point. And a property that may be difficult to sell when the time comes because the next buyer will face the same financing obstacles. That is not the affordable entry point into homeownership. That is a financial minefield with a welcome mat. And the broader issue here goes beyond condos specifically. Across the entire new construction market, builders are building for one customer, wealthy buyers. The middle of the market, starter homes, sensible condos, step-up properties that let working families build equity over time. That product is not being created at meaningful scale. The consistent exception is the production builders, Lennar and D.R. Horton, who are still putting up new homes in the $300,000 range. But outside of that lane, almost everything being built right now is pitched at the top of the income scale. And what that means for the existing housing market is that entry-level demand never fills in. The person who would have bought the starter home, built some equity over 5 years, and moved up into something larger never gets into the market. The chain never starts. Sellers waiting for those buyers keep waiting. Inventory accumulates. Delinquencies accelerate. The downward pressure builds from the bottom up. So let us bring this home and be straightforward about what all of this means depending on where you are sitting right now. If you are a seller and your listing has been sitting there for more than a few weeks without serious qualified buyer activity, not tire kickers clicking through photos online, but buyers who can actually close, you need to have an honest conversation with yourself about your price. Not what your monthly payment is. Not what you originally paid. Not what your neighbor got in 2023. What does your listing look like to someone renting a comparable place nearby, running the math on renting versus buying at your price with today's rates? That is the only calculation that matters to a buyer evaluating your home right now. If that math does not work for them, your house does not sell. It is that simple. If you are a renter, guys, you are sitting in the strongest position in this market. You have options. You have time, you have leverage, use it, negotiate on rent, push back. Do not let anyone manufacture urgency for you that does not actually exist. The fear of missing out that ran this market in 2021 and 2022 is completely gone. There is nothing happening right now that should make any renter feel like they need to buy immediately before it's too late. It is not too late. The window is not closing on you. And if you are an existing homeowner starting to feel that budget pressure tighten, the insurance that came in higher than last year, the credit card balance that keeps rolling, the mortgage that feels a little heavier every month, do not wait until you are 90 days behind to do something about it. Call your lender. Ask about forbearance. Ask about a modification. Those conversations go dramatically better at month 1 than they do after you have already entered serious delinquency. The data right now is not pointing toward a buyer demand recovery in the next 6 to 12 months. Rates have been moving up, not down. Household financial pressure is accelerating. The gap between sellers and buyers is not closing on its own. And renters, who represent the most realistic source of new demand in this market, have every single reason to stay exactly where they are. These are the facts on the table right now. Not worst-case scenarios, not doomsday predictions. The actual numbers and the direction they are moving. Make your decisions based on the market that exists today, not the one from 3 years ago. That is all we have got for today on Atlas News Report. Hit subscribe if this gave you something to think about. Drop your situation in the comments below, and we will see you in the next one.